I thought the lake house was my only safe asset, an inheritance my parents couldn't leverage. That illusion shattered when a closing attorney called to ask why I hadn't signed the final seller's affidavit. When I told him I wasn't selling, the line went dead silent. He carefully explained that the closing was in 48 hours, and according to the documents on his desk, I had already sold the property to my childhood neighbor. The radiator in my apartment had a rhythmic clang that sounded exactly like a wrench hitting a pipe, a metal-on-metal percussion that usually started around 3 in the morning. It was one of those quirks you tolerate when you are 33 years old, living in a city that demands half your paycheck for a shoebox, and saving every other dime for a future that feels perpetually 5 years away. I was a project manager for a logistics firm, a job that consisted mostly of putting out fires started by people who made 3 times my salary. My life was a series of spreadsheets, passive-aggressive emails, and that radiator. But I had an escape hatch. It was a 2-hour drive north, past the sprawling suburbs and the outlet malls, until the highway narrowed into a 2-lane road flanked by heavy pines. The house at Lake Briarwood wasn't a mansion. It was a cedar-shingled A-frame that smelled permanently of wood smoke and damp earth, sitting on a 1/4 acre of land that my grandmother had bought in the 70s, for what would now be the price of a used sedan. When she passed, the family assumed it would be sold to cover the debts my parents always seemed to be juggling, but her will had been ironclad. She left it to me, not to Marlene, not to Dennis, but to Claire. It was the only thing I owned that felt entirely mine. I was packing my weekend bag on a humid Thursday evening, tossing in a pair of worn denim shorts and a thick sweater for the cool evenings, when my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. The screen lit up with Mom. I stared at it for a second. My relationship with my parents was a carefully curated, demilitarized zone. We spoke once a week. We kept topics light. We avoided talking about money, my love life, or their latest business venture that was definitely going to be the one that paid off. I slid the icon to answer. "Hey, Mom," I said, cradling the phone between my ear and shoulder as I folded a towel. "Claire, honey, you sound tired," Marlene said. Her voice had that specific pitch she used when she wanted information. "Just work." I said, "I am heading up to the lake tomorrow after I clock out. Just for the weekend." There was a pause on the line, slightly too long to be natural. "Oh, you are going up there?" she asked. I stopped folding. "Yeah, I haven't been up in 3 weeks. The deck needs staining and I want to check the gutters before the heavy rains start." Right, she said. "It is just a lot of work, isn't it? For one person." "Your father and I were talking about that just last night. It worries us. Claire, you working 60 hours a week and then driving all that way to do manual labor? It doesn't seem like much of a life." I felt the familiar prickle of irritation on the back of my neck. We had this conversation a dozen times. They viewed the lake house as a liquid asset sitting stagnant. I viewed it as my lungs. "It relaxes me." "Mom," I said, keeping my voice even, "it is not a burden." "Well, Dennis thinks you are running yourself ragged," she said. "Maybe you should just stay in the city this weekend. Rest. Let us worry about the maintenance. We could send someone up to look at those gutters." I zipped the bag shut. "I am going." "Mom, I need the air." "All right," she said, her tone shifting to a breezy dismissal. "Just be careful on the roads. Love you too," I said, and hung up. I stood there for a moment, looking at the silent phone. It was a standard conversation for us, her probing at my boundaries, me gently reinforcing them, but something about it felt off. Usually, if I said I was going to the lake, she would ask if I had enough food or remind me to check the propane tank. This time, she had tried to talk me out of it. I shook it off. I was projecting my work stress onto her. I grabbed my keys and went to sleep, dreaming of pine trees. The drive up on Friday afternoon was a crawl until I cleared the city limits. But as soon as the skyline faded in the rearview mirror, my shoulders dropped 2 inches. By the time I turned onto the gravel access road that circled Lake Briarwood, the sun was beginning to dip, casting long, golden shadows through the trees. I pulled into the driveway, the gravel crunching under my tires, and felt that immediate wash of relief. The house looked exactly as I had left it. The cedar shingles were weathering to a soft gray. The deck railing was slightly crooked, and the rhododendrons were overdue for a trim. It was imperfect, and it was mine. I grabbed my bag and walked up the front steps, digging into my pocket for my key ring. I reached for the front door, and my hand stopped midair. Hanging from the brass doorknob was a lockbox. It was a standard black combination box, the kind realtors or contractors use. I stared at it, my brain trying to process why it was there. I hadn't hired anyone. I hadn't called a plumber or an electrician. I looked around the yard. The grass was a little high, but otherwise, everything was quiet. A squirrel chattered from a branch overhead. I unlocked the deadbolt with my key, thankfully. The lock itself hadn't been changed, and pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. Usually, the cabin smelled of old paper and cedar. Today, beneath those familiar scents, there was something sharp and chemical, fresh paint. I dropped my bag in the entryway and walked into the living room. The late afternoon light filtered through the dust motes dancing in the air. At first glance, it looked normal. My throw blanket was draped over the back of the sofa. The stack of Architectural Digest magazines was on the coffee table, but the room felt wrong. It felt sterile. I walked to the far wall, where I kept a small gallery of framed photos. A black and white shot of my grandmother standing on the dock in the 1960s. A picture of me and my college roommate. A landscape of the lake in winter. They were spaced differently. I knew the layout by heart because I had spent an hour leveling them with a laser tool 2 years ago. The gaps between the frames were supposed to be exactly 2 inches. Now, the landscape was 3 inches lower than the portrait. I reached out and touched the wall beside the frame. The paint felt slightly tacky. They had touched up the wall. Who was they? My heart started a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. I walked into the kitchen. On the counter, there was a faint ring of moisture on the granite, as if someone had set down a cold drink recently. I touched it. It was dry now, but the residue remained. I checked the back door. Locked. I checked the windows. Locked. I went back to the front door and stared at the lockbox again. I didn't know the code. I didn't know who put it there. I stepped out onto the porch, needing air. As I did, a voice drifted over from the property next door. "Claire, is that you?" I turned to see Mrs. Gable standing by the hedge that separated our lots. She was a retired schoolteacher who spent her days gardening and her evenings watching the neighborhood like a hawk. She was wearing a wide-brimmed straw hat and holding a pair of shears. "Hi, Mrs. Gable," I called back, trying to sound casual. "I didn't expect to see you this weekend," she said, walking closer to the property line. "I thought you were done for the season." "Done?" I asked, walking down the steps. "Why would you think that?" "Oh, just with all the activity this week," she said. "I assumed you were getting it ready to close up, or getting it ready for something else." "Activity?" I asked. My stomach tightened. "Yes," she said. "That nice man was here on Wednesday, the one with the silver car. The big sedan?" My mind raced. Wednesday. I was in a budget meeting from 8 in the morning until 6 at night. What man? "Mrs. Gable?" I asked. "You know," she said, waving a hand vaguely. "Your uncle, the one who comes up for the 4th of July sometimes. Kent Harlow." The name landed like a stone. Kent wasn't my uncle, though he had insisted I call him that when I was 6. He was my father's oldest friend, a man who wore Italian loafers and spoke in a voice that always sounded like he was letting you in on a secret. He ran a private equity firm in the city, or maybe it was wealth management. The title seemed to change depending on who he was trying to impress. "Kent was here?" I asked. Mrs. Gable nodded. "He was here for a few hours. He had a clipboard. I waved to him, and he said he was just checking on things for the family. He parked right in the driveway. I looked at the gravel where my own car was parked. Kent Harlow had been inside my house. He had a key. Did he have anyone with him?" I asked. "No, just him," she said, although a white van showed up after he left. Stayed for maybe 20 minutes. I didn't see who was driving. "Thanks, Mrs. Gable," I said. I felt lightheaded. "Is everything all right, dear?" she asked, tilting her head. "Fine," I said. "Just a mix-up with the schedule." Good to see you. I retreated into the house and locked the door behind me. My hands were shaking. Kent Harlow had no reason to be here. He had no ownership stake. He had no business checking on things for the family because the family didn't own this house. I did. I pulled out my phone and dialed my mother again. She answered on the second ring. Hello? Mom, I said, skipping the pleasantries. Why was Kent Harlow at my house on Wednesday? There was a silence on the other end. Not a confused silence, a guilty one. Oh, she said, you saw him? I just got here. Mom, there is a lockbox on my door. There is fresh paint on the living room wall, and the neighbor says Kent was here with a clipboard. What is going on? Claire, calm down, she said. Her voice was soothing. The way you talk to a spooked horse. We asked Kent to stop by. We were worried about the pipes. You know how that old plumbing is. He was just doing a favor. He lives 3 hours away. Mom, I said, he drove 3 hours to check pipes that I checked last month? And why is there a lockbox? I don't know about a lockbox, she said quickly. Maybe the contractor left it? Kent wanted to have a guy look at the roof. We told you. Claire, the upkeep is too much. We were just trying to get an assessment so we could help you out. I didn't ask for help, I said, and I definitely didn't give Kent a key. How did he get in? We have a spare. Claire, you know that. I felt a surge of betrayal. I had given them a spare key 5 years ago for emergencies. Fire, flood, medical crisis, not for unauthorized inspections by family friends. You had no right to send him here without asking me. I said, "Oh, stop being so dramatic," she snapped. The mask slipped for a second. We are trying to help you. You are so stressed lately. You are forgetting things. You probably mentioned the roof to your father weeks ago and forgot. You are overworked. Claire, let family handle things. I am not overworked to the point of hallucinating. Mom, I said, tell Kent to stay away from my house, and tell me the code for this lockbox so I can take it off. I don't have the code, she said. I will ask Dennis. But really, Claire, you are making a mountain out of a molehill. Go have a glass of wine and relax. The house is fine. She hung up before I could argue further. I stood in the silent living room, the phone hot in my hand. I didn't have a glass of wine. I spent the next hour tearing the house apart, looking for anything else that was out of place. I found a footprint in the dust in the guest bedroom, a large treaded boot print that was definitely not mine. I found a business card for a local pest control company on the kitchen counter that I hadn't called. I slept with a chair propped under the doorknob that night. The rest of the weekend was a wash. I couldn't relax. I felt like I was a squatter in my own home. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump. I took the lockbox off the knob by unscrewing the entire assembly and replacing it with a spare deadbolt I kept in the shed. I threw the lockbox in the trunk of my car. I drove back to the city on Sunday night, my jaw aching from clenching my teeth. Monday morning was a blur of meetings. I sat in a conference room listening to a supply chain director drone on about Q3 projections. But my mind was back at the lake. I kept thinking about the fresh paint. Why paint a 3-foot patch of wall? You only do that if you are covering something up, or if you are sprucing it up for a showing. At 2 p.m, I got back to my desk and opened my personal email. Buried in the junk folder was an email from a sender labeled TIM, Title Services. The subject line was generic. Pending documentation. File 99204. I almost deleted it. Phishing scams were getting better every day, but something caught my eye. The preview text read, Dear Claire W., please see attached for the remaining items needed prior to disbursement. Claire W. My parents sometimes wrote my name like that on birthday cards. Claire W., not Claire Wood. I opened the email. It was sent to an old email address of mine, a Hotmail account I had forwarded to my Gmail years ago and rarely used. The body of the email was brief. Ms. Wood, just a reminder that the final seller's affidavit needs to be notarized and returned before Wednesday. Let us know if you have questions regarding the wire instructions. There was no attachment, just a link to a secure portal. I stared at the screen. Seller's affidavit. Wire instructions. My hands started to type before my brain fully caught up. I opened a new tab and went to the county property appraiser's website. I navigated to the search bar and typed in the parcel ID for the lake house. I knew it by heart. The page loaded. Owner, Claire E. Wood. I let out a breath. Okay, it was still in my name. But then I scrolled down to the Recent Activity tab. Usually, this section was empty, listing only the transfer from my grandmother's estate 7 years ago. Today, there was a flag. Pending transaction. Timestamp, October 14th. Status, in escrow. October 14th was 3 weeks ago. The room seemed to tilt. My stomach dropped as if the elevator cable had just snapped. This had to be a mistake, a clerical error. Maybe the county was updating their digital records and flagged the wrong parcel. It happened. Government databases were ancient. I picked up my phone and dialed the number in the signature block of the email. TER, Title Services. It rang 4 times. Then a voicemail clicked on. You have reached the desk of Rory Blakely. Please leave a message. I hung up. I didn't want to leave a message. I wanted to scream at someone. I looked at the calendar on my wall. Today was Monday. The email mentioned Wednesday. I tried to focus on my work. I answered 3 emails about shipping containers in joyless, robotic sentences. I drank a cup of coffee that tasted like battery acid. At 4:30, my cell phone rang. It was a local number. Area code 518. The same area code as the lake house. I answered it. This is Claire. Ms. Wood? A man's voice asked. It was professional, crisp, but hurried. Yes, I said. This is Rory Blakely from TR, Title Services. I saw I missed a call from this number earlier. I am glad I caught you. We are getting down to the wire here. My throat felt dry. Mr. Blakely. I said, I got an email from you. I think there is a mistake. A pause. A mistake regarding the closing date? He asked. I know we pushed it up a day, but Kent said you were aware of that. Kent. The room went silent. The hum of the office air conditioner seemed to vanish. Kent? I asked. My voice barely a whisper. Yes. Kent Harlow. The buyer. Blakely said. Look, Ms. Wood, I don't mean to pressure you, but the closing is scheduled for Wednesday morning. 48 hours from now, we have the purchase agreement, the disclosure, and the title work done. But I'm still missing the seller's affidavit and the final closing statement signature from you. I stood up. My chair rolled back and hit the filing cabinet with a loud bang. But I didn't care. Mr. Blakely, I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice, I am not selling my house. There was a long silence on the other end, the kind of silence where you can hear the other person thinking, recalculating, assessing. I am sorry, Blakely said. I am not selling Lake Briarwood. I said, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I never agreed to sell it. I don't know why you have a file open, but you need to close it immediately. I heard the sound of papers shuffling on his end. Ms. Wood, Blakely said slowly, his tone shifting from hurried to cautious. I have a purchase and sale agreement right here in front of me, dated October 12th. I don't care what you have. I said, I didn't sign it. He paused again. Ms. Wood, he said, and his voice was very quiet now. Your signature appears on 2 documents already. That is why I'm calling. I went cold. It wasn't a figure of speech. A physical chill started at the base of my spine and radiated outward, numbing my fingers. What? I whispered. I have a signature on the initial offer and the property disclosure. He said, It is notarized. That is impossible. I said, Ms. Wood, Blakely said, and now he sounded like a lawyer. If you are saying you didn't sign these, we have a very serious problem, but the closing is moving forward based on these documents. If you are telling me this is fraud, you need to tell me that explicitly. Right now. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I thought of the lockbox, the fresh paint, the way my mother had laughed it off. Let family handle things. They hadn't just crossed a boundary. They had stolen my name. Ms. Wood? Blakely asked. Are you there? I took a breath. It felt like inhaling glass. Send me the documents. I said. "Send me everything you have. Right now. I will email the packet," he said. "But Ms. Wood?" "Yes. If you plan to stop this closing, you are going to need more than a phone call." I hung up. I stared at the black screen of my phone, waiting for the email notification to ping, knowing that the second it did, the life I had built, the quiet, safe, independent life, was over. My parents hadn't just sold a house, they had sold me. The email notification chimed. I clicked open. The email from Rory Blakely arrived with a cheerful ding that sounded obscenely bright for the contents it carried. I sat at my desk, the fluorescent lights of the office humming overhead, and stared at the attachment icon. It was a PDF file labeled Wood Harlow Closing Packet Final PDF. My hand hovered over the mouse. I felt a strange dissociation, as if I were watching myself from the ceiling. Opening that file felt like opening a door to a room I knew contained a body. Once I saw what was inside, I could never unsee it. I could never go back to being the daughter who simply had a slightly strained relationship with her parents. I would become the daughter who was a victim. I clicked. The document loaded, scrolling smooth and white on the screen. The first page was the purchase and sale agreement. The header was standard legal boilerplate, but my eyes darted immediately to the parties involved. Seller: Claire E. Wood. Buyer: Kent Harlow. And then the price: $200,000. I let out a short, sharp breath that was almost a laugh. The lake house sits on prime frontage. Even in a down market, even with the deck needing work and the kitchen stuck in the 1990s, it was worth $450,000, easily. $200,000 wasn't a sale price. It was a theft. It was a number you wrote down when you were trying to hide assets or dodge transfer taxes. It was a number that screamed family favor. I scrolled down. Page 4. The signature block. There was a line for my name, and resting on top of it, in blue ink that looked like it had been scanned from a ballpoint pen, was a signature: Claire Wood. I leaned in until my nose was inches from the monitor. It looked like my signature. It had the loop on the C, the sharp point on the W. To a stranger, or a bank teller, or a closing attorney, it would look perfectly legitimate, but it wasn't mine. I signed my name with a heavy hand. I pressed down hard on the downstrokes. This signature floated. It was tentative. The spacing between the O and the D in my last name was too wide, a millimeter of hesitation that betrayed the hand holding the pen, and the tail of the final D didn't curve up. It trailed off flat. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. It was a violation so intimate, it felt physical. Someone had practiced this. Someone had sat at a table with a piece of scratch paper and my old birthday cards or checks and practiced being me until they got it close enough to pass. I scrolled further. A seller's disclosure form, checking no on every box regarding defects. Signed. And then, the document that made my blood run cold. A limited power of attorney. This document authorized Marlene Wood, my mother, to act on my behalf, specifically for the purpose of facilitating the transfer of the property located at 14 Briarwood Lane. It was dated October 12th. My mother had assigned herself the power to sell my house, and she had forged my signature to give herself that power. It was a loop of fraud so tight it was almost elegant. I needed to vomit. I grabbed my wastebasket, dry heaving into it, but nothing came up except acid and panic. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and sat back up. I couldn't just stare at the screen. I needed to hear them say it. I needed to hear the lie in their actual voices. I picked up my phone and dialed my parents' landline. They still had one, a relic they refused to give up. It rang 4 times before my father picked up. "Hello? Dad?" I said. The single word came out strangled. "Claire?" he asked. "You sound terrible. Are you coming down with something? I am looking at a purchase and sale agreement," I said. The silence on the other end was heavy. It wasn't the silence of confusion. It was the silence of a man bracing for impact. "Oh," he said. His voice dropped an octave, shifting into the reasonable, paternal tone he used when he was trying to sell a client on a high-risk stock. "You spoke to the attorney. We were going to call you tonight. Claire." We wanted to sit down and explain it properly. Explain what? I asked, my voice rising. Explain why you forged my signature? Explain why you sold my house to Kent for half its value without telling me? Claire, listen to me, he said, and I could hear my mother whispering frantically in the background. Lower your voice. You are hysterical. I am not hysterical, I shouted, drawing a look from a coworker passing my cubicle. I lowered my voice to a hiss. I am looking at a felony. Dad, who signed this? Did you sign it? Did Mom? We did this for you, he said. The words landed like a slap. For me? I asked. Look at your life. Claire, he said. You are drowning. You work all the time. You live in that tiny apartment. We see you getting older, getting more tired. You can't handle the taxes on the lake house. You can't handle the maintenance. It is an albatross around your neck. We wanted to liquidate it, get you a nice nest egg, and take the burden off your shoulders. You sold it for $200,000. I said, that is not a nest egg. That is a giveaway. It is a fair price for a quick cash deal among friends, he said smoothly. Kent is doing us a favor taking it as is. No inspections, no repairs, just cash. We were going to put the money in an account for you. Surprise you with it. You forged my name. I repeated. I felt like a broken record, but it was the only fact I could cling to. We didn't forge anything, he said, sounding almost offended. We signed as your agents. We knew you would agree if you just stopped being so stubborn and looked at the big picture. We were acting in your best interest. I looked at the power of attorney on my screen. It wasn't signed as an agent. It was signed as me, to make them agents. That is not how the law works. Dad, I said, you can't sign my name to give yourself permission to sign my name. Technicalities. He scoffed. Always the details with you, never the intent. Marlene, talk to her. She is being impossible. There was a fumbling sound, and then my mother came on the line. Claire, sweetheart, she said, her voice trembling with a curated fragility. Why are you attacking us? We have been so worried about you. You seem so unstable lately, so stressed. We just wanted to fix one thing for you. Unstable? I asked. I have a job. I pay my bills. I have a savings account. How am I unstable? You are lonely, she said. You hide away at that lake house like a hermit. It is not healthy. We thought if we let it go, you would be forced to engage with the real world again. We are your parents. We love you. Why does that make us criminals in your eyes? The guilt washed over me, a familiar, stifling tide. They were experts at this. They took their boundary-stomping entitlement and wrapped it in the language of care. We hurt you because we love you. We stole from you to save you. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I never said I wanted to sell. I never signed those papers. You would have, if you weren't so stubborn, she said. We just accelerated the process. Kent is family. He's going to let us use the place whenever we want. Nothing really changes, except you get some money and lose the headache. Why can't you say thank you? I stared at the phone. They genuinely believed this. Or they had told themselves the lie so many times it had calcified into truth. I am not saying thank you, I said. I am saying no. Tell the attorney to stop. We can't stop it. Claire, my father's voice cut back in. Harder this time. The money is already allocated. Allocated? I asked. What does that mean? It is complicated, he said. Business. Just sign the affidavit the attorney sent you. Don't make us look like fools in front of Kent. Don't embarrass the family. I hung up. My hand was shaking so badly I dropped the phone on my desk. The money is already allocated. That was the key. They hadn't sold the house for me. They had sold it because they needed the money, or they owed Kent something, and my inheritance was the only currency they had left. I looked back at the PDF. I needed to focus. I needed to stop feeling like a daughter and start thinking like a project manager. Break it down. Find the failure points. I zoomed in on the notary stamp on the power of attorney. State of New York. Qualified in Albany County. Commission expires. June 2028. Notary Public. Linda G. Miller. There was a small logo in the corner of the stamp impression. The Pack Ship Station. I Googled the name. It was a strip mall shipping center on 4th Avenue, on the complete opposite side of the city from where I lived and worked. I had never set foot in it. I looked at the date next to the signature. October 12th. I pulled up my work calendar. October 12th was a Thursday. I scrolled back. October 12th. 8 o'clock a.m. 5 o'clock p.m. Q4. Strategy offsite. Location. Sheraton Conference Center. Room B. I had been stuck in a hotel conference room with 20 other people all day. I had ordered a turkey club sandwich for lunch and spilled mustard on my blouse. I remembered it vividly. I hadn't left the building until 6. There was no way I could have been at a pack ship on 4th Avenue at 2 in the afternoon, which is what the timestamp on the notary log likely said. I printed the calendar page. I printed the email with the attached PDF. I started a physical file folder, labeling it simply House. I needed to go back to the lake. I needed to see what else they had done. I called in sick the next morning. It was the first time in 3 years I had used a sick day. I didn't care. I drove north, my eyes scanning the rearview mirror every few minutes, paranoid that a silver sedan was following me. The paranoia was irrational, but the world didn't feel rational anymore. When I pulled into the driveway at Lake Briarwood, the sky was a bruised purple, threatening rain. The house sat quiet and still. I had removed the lockbox on my last trip, and I was relieved to see it hadn't been replaced. I let myself in. The smell of fresh paint was fainter now. Settled into the wood, I began a systematic search. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. A contract? A letter? A set of keys? I checked the drawers in the kitchen. Nothing but old batteries and twist ties. I checked the desk in the loft. Just my own journals. I went into the kitchen and opened the cabinet under the sink to check for leaks, a habit, and saw something taped to the inside of the cabinet door. It was a piece of paper in a plastic sheet protector. Inventory for insurance purposes. Harlow property. My breath hitched. I peeled the tape off and held the sheet up to the light. It was a detailed list of every major appliance and piece of furniture in the house. Samsung refrigerator, Model X, Ethan Allen sofa, beige, antique oak dining table. At the bottom of the page, in the footer, was a date. September 20th. September. They had been planning this for over a month. While I was coming up here for weekends, thinking about staining the deck, thinking about planting bulbs for the spring. Kent Harlow had been inventorying my furniture. He had been counting my spoons. The date meant something else, too. It meant this wasn't a sudden desperate move by my parents. It was a premeditated extraction. They had likely been negotiating this deal with Kent for weeks before they even mentioned the upkeep being too much for me. I sat down on the kitchen floor, clutching the inventory list. The doubt started to creep in then, insidious and cold. Did I agree to this? I closed my eyes. I could hear my mother's voice. You are so overwhelmed. You are unstable. Was I? I had been tired lately. I had been drinking a glass of wine or two every night to fall asleep. Had I signed something at a family dinner? Had they slid a paper across the table while I was venting about work and said, "Just sign this for the insurance"? And I did it without looking? No. I opened my eyes. I looked at the inventory list. September 20th. I hadn't seen my parents in September. I had been traveling for work. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. I searched for any transactions near the pack ship on 4th Avenue. Nothing. I checked my text messages from October 12th. 10:15 a.m. Meet a mom. Stuck in this strategy meeting. Kill me. 10:18 a.m. Mom, to me. Hang in there. We are thinking of you. She knew. She knew I was in a meeting. She had texted me while she, or someone she hired, was standing at a counter forging my name. The anger that flared up then was different from the panic I had felt earlier. It was colder. It was harder. It settled in my chest like a lead weight. I wasn't crazy. I was being erased. I needed advice, but not from a lawyer yet. I wasn't ready to pay a retainer. I needed a sanity check. I called Sarah. Sarah was my college roommate, now a paralegal at a massive corporate firm in the city. She dealt with contracts all day. Sarah, I said when she picked up, I need you to tell me how to find out if my parents have any liens against them. Claire? She asked. Hello to you too. What is going on? I explained it. The house, the signature, the inventory list, the date. Jesus, Claire, she breathed. That is terrifying. I feel like I'm losing my mind. I said, they are so convincing. They make me feel like I am the one screwing up by not going along with it. That is the point, Sarah said. That is the gaslighting. Listen to me. You need to go to the county recorder's office, not the website, the physical office. Why? I asked. Because the online portal lags, she said, and because you can see who requested the file. If they are moving this fast, there is a paper trail of urgency. You need to see the deed history, and you need to look for any judgments or liens against your parents. If they are selling your house for cash in a hurry, it is because they need to plug a hole somewhere else. I hung up and got back in the car. The county recorder's office was in the basement of the courthouse, a room that smelled of dust, dry toner, and floor wax. It was quiet, save for the hum of a large copier and the tapping of a keyboard. I walked up to the counter. The clerk was an older woman with glasses on a chain and a cardigan wrapped tight around her shoulders. Her name tag said, Barbara. Can I help you? She asked, not looking up from her screen. I need to pull the file for a property, I said, and I want to check for any recorded liens against Marlene and Dennis Wood. Barbara looked up then, assessing me. Parcel number? I recited it. She typed it in. Her eyebrows went up. You are the fourth person to ask for this file in 2 weeks. She said, Fourth? I asked. Who else? She shrugged. Public record doesn't require ID to look, just to file, but it has been pulled a lot. She disappeared into the back rows of filing cabinets. I stood there, listening to the hum of the copier. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Fourth person, Kent, my father, the attorney. Who else? Barbara came back with a thick manila folder and placed it on the counter. Here is the deed, she said. Transferred to Claire E. Wood 7 years ago. Clear title. I opened it. The deed was there, signed by my grandmother's executor, but there is a new filing in the temporary index. She said, it hasn't been digitized yet. She slid a single sheet of paper across the counter. It was a notice of interest filed 3 months ago. I read the text. It was a lien filed by a company called Harlow Equity Solutions against Marlene and Dennis Wood. The amount was for $150,000, but it was the description of the collateral that made the room spin. Collateral. Future proceeds from the sale of the property located at 14 Briarwood Lane. They had borrowed money from Kent 3 months ago, and they had listed my house, which they did not own, as the collateral to secure the loan. The sale wasn't a family favor. It wasn't about helping me. It was a foreclosure. They had defaulted on the loan, or the term was up, and Kent was calling in the debt. He wasn't buying the house for $200,000. He was taking it to cover the $150,000 they owed him, plus $50,000 in interest or fees to make it look like a purchase. My parents had bet my house and lost. I stared at the paper. The audacity was breathtaking. They had leveraged an asset they didn't own, banking on the fact that when the time came, they could bully or guilt me into signing it over. And when they realized they couldn't bully me fast enough, they just signed it themselves. Is this legal? I asked Barbara, my voice sounding hollow. Can you list a property you don't own as collateral? Barbara peered at the document. You can list the proceeds of a sale, she said. It is a promise to pay from a specific source. But if they don't own the source, well, that is between them and the lender. Unless they represented that they had authority to sell it, the power of attorney, that was why they needed it, to prove to the title company that they had the authority to fulfill the collateral pledge. I requested certified copies of everything, the deed, the lien, the filing history. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright, cold afternoon sun. I felt heavier, but also clearer. The fog of my mother's emotional manipulation had burned off. This wasn't about love or concern. This was simple, cold arithmetic. They owed money. I was the piggy bank. My phone rang. It was Rory Blakely. I stared at the screen. I didn't want to answer. I wanted to drive away and keep driving, but silence was consent. Silence was what they were counting on. I answered, "Ms. Wood?" Blakely's voice was tight. He sounded tired. "I am here." I said, "I haven't received the affidavit," he said, "and the title insurer is asking questions about the discrepancy in the signature dates." "There is a discrepancy because I didn't sign them." "Mr. Blakely?" I said. He sighed. A long, weary exhalation. "Ms. Wood," he said, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. I can delay this closing. I can tell the other party there is a cloud on the title." "Do it," I said. "But," he continued, his voice dropping, becoming grave, "if you are asserting that the documents in my possession are forged, that is a criminal accusation. If I pause this closing based on fraud, I have to report it. I have to file a suspicious activity report. The lender, Mr. Harlow, will be notified that the deal is dead due to fraud." I gripped the steering wheel. I knew what he was saying. He was giving me the "are you sure" warning, because once I said the word fraud to an officer of the court, the missile was launched. It would hit my parents. It would hit Kent. There would be investigations. There would be depositions. There might be handcuffs. I thought of my father's voice. "Don't embarrass the family." I thought of the inventory list. September 20th. I thought of the lockbox on my door. They hadn't hesitated to make me a victim. Why should I hesitate to make them accountable? "Ms. Wood?" Blakely asked. "Do you want me to stop the closing?" I took a deep breath. "Yes," I said. "It is fraud. Stop it." There was a pause, a finality. "Understood." Blakely said, "I will issue the notice immediately." The line clicked dead. I sat in my car in the courthouse parking lot, the certified copies of my parents' betrayal resting on the passenger seat. I had just declared war on my own family, and for the first time in weeks, the shaking in my hands stopped. The office of Simone Vance did not look like the kind of place where you went to cry about your family. It looked like a place where you went to surgically remove a tumor. The walls were painted a severe, clinical gray, and the desk was a slab of glass so clean it looked like a sheet of ice. Simone herself was a woman of sharp angles and even sharper tailoring, with hair cut into a bob that moved like a solid helmet of onyx when she turned her head. I sat in the leather chair opposite her, clutching the manila folder from the county clerk's office like a shield. I had spent the last 24 hours oscillating between rage and a hollow, aching grief. But Simone didn't seem interested in either. She leafed through the documents I had brought. The deed, the lien notice, the printout of the email from Rory Blakely. She read with a terrifying speed, her eyes darting back and forth, her face impassive. Finally, she closed the folder and placed her hands flat on the desk. "You have stopped the closing?" she asked. Her voice was low and devoid of unnecessary inflection. "Yes," I said. "I told the closing attorney it was fraud." "Good," she said. "That was the correct first step. But now we have to move very quickly, because you have just backed a cornered animal into a wall." "My parents?" I asked. "And the buyer?" She said, "Ms. Wood, I want you to listen to me. You are currently operating on emotion. You are hurt. You are shocked. You are wondering how your mother and father could do this to you. Those feelings are valid, but they are useless in a court of law. In fact, they are liabilities. If you go into a deposition crying, they will paint you as hysterical. If you scream at them, they will paint you as unstable." She leaned forward slightly. "We need to stop arguing about feelings and start building a timeline that cannot be talked around." She said, "Fraud is not a feeling. Fraud is a sequence of provable actions. We need to prove that you were not in the room when that pen hit the paper. We need to prove that money changed hands without your consent. We need to prove intent." She pulled a yellow legal pad toward her. "I am sending preservation letters today," she continued, the pen scratching loudly across the paper. "To T.R. Title Services. To the Pack and Ship Station. To Mr. Harlow. To your parents." "What does that do?" I asked. "It puts them on notice that litigation is imminent," she said. "It legally obligates them to preserve every scrap of data related to this transaction. emails, text messages, phone logs, security footage, metadata. If they delete a single text message after receiving this letter, it is spoliation of evidence, and I will crucify them for it. She looked up at me. I want the notary logs, she said. I want the ID copies they claim to use. I want the security footage from the notary storefront. And I want the exact chain of email communication between the title company and whoever was pretending to be you. They used an old email address. I said, one I haven't used in years. We will get the IP addresses, she said. We will find out whose device was logged into that account. But first, you need to go completely dark with your family. No angry texts, no long phone calls trying to get closure. Everything goes through me. I nodded, though the thought made my stomach twist. Going dark felt like severing a limb. One more thing, Simone said, tapping the lean document. This Mr. Harlow? You say he is a family friend? Yes, I said. I grew up calling him Uncle Kent. Simone's eyes narrowed. Be very careful with him. He is not your uncle. He is a distressed debt investor who just tried to steal a $500,000 asset for pennies. He is not emotional about this. He is calculating. And right now, he is calculating how to make you look like the problem. I left Simone's office feeling slightly less like a victim and more like a soldier. But the feeling was fragile. I drove back to my apartment. The city gray and overcast. When I got home, I opened my laptop and logged into the homeowner portal for the insurance company that covered the lake house. I wanted to make sure the policy was still in my name, that they hadn't tried to cancel it to switch it to Kent. The policy was active, but there was a note in the recent inquiries tab. Quote requested. October 25th. Requester. Kent Harlow. Status. Provided. He had priced out his own insurance policy on my house 2 weeks ago. I kept digging. I called the local utility company up at the lake, pretending to be checking on a bill. Oh, Ms. Wood, the operator said cheerfully. We actually had a request to transfer service effective November 1st. Should we cancel that now? My hand tightened on the phone. Who requested it? A Mr. Harlow, she said. He provided a copy of the purchase agreement. He had been moving the pieces into place with the confidence of a man who knew the outcome was guaranteed. He hadn't just assumed I would sell. He had proceeded as if I didn't exist, as if I were just a signature to be acquired, an obstacle to be cleared. And the worst part was, he had never said a word to me. I had seen him at a wedding 3 months ago. He had hugged me, asked about my job, told me I looked tired and should take a vacation. He had smiled that crinkly-eyed, benevolent smile. All the while, he must have been looking at me and seeing a line item on a ledger. I couldn't just let the lawyers handle him. I needed to look him in the eye. I needed to see if he could lie to my face when he knew the jig was up. I texted him, Kent, we need to talk. Today. He replied instantly, of course. Claire, I heard there was a hiccup. Meet me at the roastery on 5th? A hiccup. He called grand larceny a hiccup. The roastery was a neutral ground, a high-end coffee shop filled with people typing on MacBooks and ignoring the world. I arrived 10 minutes early and sat in a corner booth, my back to the wall. I ordered a black coffee and watched the door. Kent walked in right on time. He was a handsome man in his early 60s, silver-haired, wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who had nothing to hide. He saw me and smiled. Walking over with his arms open, Claire Bear, he said, using the nickname he had given me when I was 5. I didn't stand up. I didn't smile. I kept my hands wrapped around my coffee cup. Sit down. Kent, I said. He paused, his smile faltering just a fraction, then recovered. He pulled out the chair opposite me and sat, clasping his hands on the table. You seem upset, he said gently. Your mother told me you were having a rough week. I am sorry things got so messy at the end here. Messy? I asked. You mean the part where you tried to buy my house without asking me? He sighed, a sound of paternal patience. Claire, he said, you are looking at this the wrong way. Your parents came to me. They were desperate. They were worried about you. They said the house was becoming a burden, that you were overwhelmed with work and couldn't keep up with the repairs. They asked me to step in and take it off your hands. So you decided to buy it for 50% of its market value? I asked. To help me? It is not just about the price. Claire, he said smoothly, it is a cash deal. No contingencies. No waiting. And I told Marlene that you guys could still use the place. I am not trying to kick you out. I am trying to keep the property in the extended family. It is the family's place. After all, my place. I said, it is my place, not the family's. Mine. He waved a hand dismissively. Technicalities. The point is, I was trying to do a good thing. I was trying to create liquidity for your parents so they could help you. Help me with what? I asked. I don't need money. Kent, I have a job. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Your parents are in a tight spot. Claire, they didn't want to worry you. They wanted to handle it quietly. I stepped up to provide a solution. I structured this to protect everyone. I looked at him, searching for a flicker of shame, but there was none. Just a smooth, polished surface. If you were trying to help me, I said, asking the question that had been burning in my throat for 3 days. Why didn't you call me? He blinked. What? You have my phone number. I said, we text on my birthday. You sent me a LinkedIn message when I got promoted. If you were buying my house, why didn't you pick up the phone and say, hey Claire, I am buying your house? He shifted in his seat. He looked away, toward the counter, then back at me. Your parents said it would be better if they handled it. He said, why? I pressed. Because they said you would be emotional, he said. They said you were attached to the place in an unhealthy way and that you wouldn't see the logic of the sale. They wanted to present it to you as a done deal so you wouldn't have to stress about the decision. So you knew. I said, knew what? You knew I hadn't agreed. I said, you knew I didn't know about the sale. That is why you didn't call. You knew that if you called me, I would say no. So you went around me. You conspired with them to forge my signature because you knew it was the only way to get the deed. His face hardened. The avuncular mask slipped, revealing the shark beneath. I didn't conspire to do anything. He said cold and sharp. I was presented with signed documents. I assumed your parents had your power of attorney, which they provided. If there is a dispute between you and them about authority, that is a family matter. Don't drag me into your domestic drama. You ordered inspections. I said, you ordered insurance. You changed the locks. You were measuring my windows while I was at work. I was protecting my investment. He said, it wasn't your investment. I snapped, loud enough that the barista looked over. It was my home. Kent stood up. He buttoned his jacket. Look, Claire, he said, I am trying to be reasonable here. I am trying to be the friend your father thinks I am. But if you want to play hardball, you need to understand the reality. Your parents owe a lot of money. If this sale doesn't go through, they are going to lose their house, their actual house, not your little vacation cabin. I stared at him. Is that a threat? I asked. It is a fact, he said. I hold the note. I have been patient, but my patience has limits. If you blow this deal up, the fallout lands on them. Think about that before you listen to whatever shark lawyer you hired. He turned and walked out of the coffee shop, leaving me shaking in the booth. I went straight to Simone's office from the coffee shop. I didn't have an appointment, but her receptionist saw my face and waved me back. He admitted it, I told Simone, pacing the length of her small office. He admitted he didn't call me because he knew I would say no. He knew my parents were handling it behind my back. Simone nodded, typing notes on her laptop. Did you record the conversation? She asked. No, I said. I was too angry to think of it. That is fine, she said. His actions speak louder than his words. And speaking of actions, the title company just responded to my preservation letter. They are terrified. They dumped their entire email log to us in an hour. She turned her monitor so I could see it. Look at this, she said. It was a chain of emails between Rory Blakely and an email address. Claire Wood. design@gmail.com. My real email address was clairewood. designs@gmail.com, plural, an S at the end. This address had no S. It was missing one letter, One tiny, invisible letter. I leaned in, reading the messages sent from the fake account. Hi, Rory. Attached is the signed affidavit. Sorry for the delay. Work has been crazy. Claire. Rory. Here's the copy of my driver's license. Let me know if you need a clearer scan. Best. Claire. The syntax was breezy, cheerful. It sounded like me on a good day. And the driver's license attached? It was my license. The photo was me. The ID number was correct. Where did they get a scan of my license? I whispered. Simone looked at me. Think, who has access to your purse? Who has been in your apartment? My mother? I said, she came over for dinner 2 months ago. I left my bag in the hallway. She could have taken it out, snapped a photo with her phone, and put it back in 10 seconds. It was a violation that felt grosser than the forged signature. She had used my identity, my face, to rob me. And look at the timestamps. Simone said, Sent. October 14th, 2:15 p.m. Who created the email account? I asked. We are tracing the IP. Simone said, but I'm willing to bet it wasn't a Russian hacker. I couldn't put it off anymore. I had to confront the source. I drove to my parents' house that evening. It was a colonial in the suburbs. The house I had grown up in. The lawn was manicured. The wreath on the door was seasonal. It looked like the home of 2 people who played by the rules. I let myself in with my key. They were in the living room, watching television. My father had a scotch in his hand. My mother was knitting. It was a scene of domestic tranquility that made me want to scream. They looked up when I walked in. My mother's face went pale. My father set his drink down. Claire, my mother said, starting to rise. We didn't know you were coming. Sit down, I said. She sat. I stood in the center of the room, looking at them. I didn't feel the urge to yell anymore. I just felt a profound, exhausting disappointment. I know about the email address. I said, Clairewood, design. Without the My father looked at the floor. My mother looked at my father. I know about the notary. I continued. I know about the preservation letters my lawyer sent today. I know everything. My father sighed. A heavy, rattling sound. We didn't have a choice. Claire, he said, there is always a choice. I said, you chose to commit a crime against your daughter. Why? He rubbed his face with his hands. It was an investment, he said. A sure thing. A tech startup in Austin. Kent introduced me to the founders. I put everything into it. The retirement accounts, the home equity line, everything. And? I asked. And it evaporated. He said, they were investigated by the SEC. The assets were frozen. The stock is worth 0. I stared at him. He had gambled their future and lost. We were overextended. My mother whispered, we couldn't make the mortgage payments. We were going to lose this house. Claire, your childhood home. So you decided to take mine? I asked. We borrowed money from Kent to float us. My father said, just until the lawsuit settled. We thought we would get the money back, but the settlement is dragging on. Kent called the loan. He called the loan. I repeated. He said he couldn't wait anymore. My father said. He said he needed collateral. He suggested the lake house. He said we could transfer it to him. He would hold it for a year, and we could buy it back once the settlement money came in. It was supposed to be temporary. A bridge? And the sale price? I asked. The $200,000? That is the loan amount plus his fees. My father said, we weren't actually keeping the money. It was just a paper transaction to satisfy his investors. I felt like I was going to throw up. So let me get this straight. I said, you borrowed money from Kent. You couldn't pay it back. So you promised him my house. And when I didn't agree to sell it, you became him. You created a fake email. You forged my signature. You notarized it at a strip mall. You sent him my driver's license. We intended to pay you back, my mother cried out. Tears were streaming down her face now. We were going to pay you the full market value as soon as the settlement came through. We would never steal from you. Claire, you already did, I shouted. The volume of my voice made them both flinch. You stole my name. You stole my trust. You made me think I was going crazy. I paced the room, my heart pounding. And what happens now? I asked. Now that I have stopped the closing? My father looked up, his eyes red and rimmed with fear. Kent says if we don't deliver the deed by Friday, he is going to foreclose on this house. He said, he has a second mortgage on it. He will take everything. Claire, we will be on the street. I looked at them. They were small. They were terrified. They were my parents. And for a second, the old reflex kicked in. The instinct to save them. The instinct to say, okay, I will fix it. I will sign the papers. I will take the hit. But then I remembered the lockbox. I remembered the inventory list. I remembered Kent's smug face in the coffee shop. It is the family's place. He isn't just a friend, is he? I asked. My father shook his head. No. I walked over to the side table where my father kept his mail. I sifted through the stack until I found a letter with the return address, Harlow Equity Solutions. I opened it, ignoring my father's protest. It was a statement for a bridge capital facility. The interest rate was 14%. There were origination fees of $10,000, late fees of $5,000. This wasn't a loan between friends. This was loan sharking wrapped in a velvet glove. Kent had lent them money he knew they couldn't pay back, specifically to get leverage over their assets, and when their assets weren't enough, he pointed them toward mine. He played you, I said, tossing the letter back on the table. He knew you would get desperate. He knew you would come for my house. We had to. My mother sobbed. You didn't have to commit fraud. I said, you could have asked me. You would have said no. My father shouted. And he was right. I would have said no. I would have offered to help them with their mortgage. Maybe. I would have offered to let them live with me. But I would never have let them sell the one thing that was truly mine to pay off a gambling debt. I looked at them one last time. I am not signing. I said, Claire, please, my mother begged, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. I am not signing. I repeated. And if you try to forge my name again, I will have Simone call the district attorney. I walked out of the house. I could hear my mother weeping behind the closed door. I went back to Simone's office the next morning. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean of any emotion other than a grim determination. I told her everything, the investment, the bridge loan, the threat of foreclosure on their home. Simone listened, her face unreadable. This changes things, she said. How? I asked. It proves the motive, she said, but it also proves the conspiracy. Your parents were under duress, yes, but they acted as agents of Mr. Harlow's scheme. She pulled a document from her printer. I did some digging into Harlow Equity Solutions, she said. She slid the paper across the desk. It was a list of property transfers in the county over the last 5 years. Look at the pattern, she said. I looked. Harlow Equity Solutions, or Kent Harlow, was listed as the grantee on 12 different properties. All of them were distressed sales, she said. All of them were acquired for significantly below market value. And 3 of them? She pointed to 3 highlighted rows. 3 of them involved family transfers or quitclaim deeds just prior to his acquisition. He targets families. I said, he finds people who are over-leveraged, she said. He lends them money at predatory rates, and when they can't pay, he takes their assets, and if they don't have enough assets, he encourages them to find assets elsewhere, like their children's inheritance. He is a predator. I said, yes, she said, but here's the problem. She leaned back in her chair. The paper trail your parents created? It is good. It is really good. What do you mean? I asked. They have a notarized power of attorney. She said, yes, we know it is forged, but on the face of it, it looks legal. They have emails from you approving the sale. They have a signed purchase agreement. If we go to court, Kent is going to claim he was a bona fide purchaser for value. He is going to say he had no way of knowing your parents were lying. He is going to say he relied on the documents in good faith. But he knew, I said. He admitted it. In a coffee shop, with no recording. She reminded me. In court, he will deny it. He will say he thought your parents had your full consent. He will paint you as the estranged, unstable daughter who is trying to renege on a deal because she wants more money. So what do we do? I asked. We have to break the chain, she said. We have to prove that he wasn't just a passive buyer. We have to prove he was the architect. She looked at the preservation letters she had sent. We need to find the crack in the foundation, she said. And I think the crack is the notary. The notary? Linda G. Miller at the Pack and Ship. Simone said, if we can break her, if we can get her to admit that she didn't see you sign that document, that she notarized it for your parents as a favor, or because she was paid off, then the power of attorney collapses. And if the power of attorney collapses, the whole deal is void. But why would she admit that? I asked. It would cost her her license. Because, Simone said, a shark smile crossing her face for the first time, the penalty for notary fraud is severe, and I am going to make her very, very afraid. She picked up her phone. But first, she said, we need to secure the property. If Kent thinks he is losing, he might try to damage the asset, or occupy it. Occupy it? I asked. Possession is 9/10 of the law. Claire, if he moves in, getting him out will be a nightmare. She handed me a piece of paper. Go to the lake, she said. Change the locks again, install cameras, and put this sign in the window. I looked at the sign. It was a court order. Temporary restraining order. I took it. I'm going up there tonight. I said, good, she said. And Claire? Yes? Don't let them in. Not your parents. Not Kent. Not anyone. I won't, I said. I walked out of her office. The timeline was built. The battle lines were drawn. I wasn't just fighting for a vacation home anymore. I was fighting to break a cycle that had almost consumed me. I was fighting for the truth, and I was ready to burn their lies to the ground. The email from the court clerk arrived at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday. A sterile notification that changed the gravity of my entire world. Order granting temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction. I read it twice. Judge Franklin had reviewed Simone's emergency filing, the affidavit stating I had not signed the documents, the timeline discrepancies, the questionable notarization, and he had dropped the gavel. The closing was frozen. The title was locked. For the next 14 days, nobody could sell, transfer, or encumber the property at Lake Briarwood. It was a victory, but it felt like holding a live grenade. The pin was pulled, and while I wasn't blowing up, I was the one standing there holding the explosive while everyone else ran for cover. Simone called me 5 minutes later. We got it, she said. Her voice was calm, professional. The judge saw enough smoke to suspect a fire. Kent's lawyers are already filing a motion to dissolve, claiming irreparable harm to their client. But they won't get a hearing until next week. We have breathing room. What happens now? I asked, staring at the rain streaking my office window. Now we dig, she said, and now they panic. Expect the pressure to shift from legal to personal. They can't beat you on the paperwork right now, so they will try to beat you on the narrative. She was right. The legal system had paused, but the family grapevine was working overtime. It started with a text from my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, a woman who lived for drama disguised as concern. Claire, honey, your mom called me in tears. She says you're having some kind of breakdown. Please don't shut us out. We know work has been hard, but suing your parents? Call me. Then a voicemail from my cousin David. Hey Claire, heard things are getting weird. Just, look, I don't know what is going on, but Uncle Dennis says you are being manipulated by some predatory lawyer who wants to drain the estate. Just make sure you know who your real friends are. I sat on my couch, listening to the messages, feeling a familiar, childish tightness in my chest. It was the oldest dynamic in my family. Paint over the cracks, smile for the neighbors, and if anyone points out the rot, label them the problem. They were framing me as unstable. They were planting the seeds of poor Claire. She just burned out and lashed out at the people who love her. The urge to fight back was visceral. I wanted to screenshot the forged documents and blast them into the family group chat. I wanted to post the lien notice on Facebook. I wanted to scream, I am not crazy. I am the victim. But I heard Simone's voice in my head. Fraud is not a feeling. Fraud is a sequence of provable actions. If I engaged, if I argued, I looked like the hysterical daughter they were describing. If I stayed silent and let the evidence speak, I looked like a plaintiff. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb. I didn't reply to Aunt Linda. I didn't call David back. I poured a glass of water, sat at my kitchen table, and wrote down the names of everyone who contacted me in a notebook, dating the entry. I was building a log of the harassment. I was turning their social pressure into Exhibit B. I needed to be at the house. Simone had told me to secure the property, and frankly, I didn't trust the locks I'd installed last weekend. If Kent was desperate enough to measure my windows while I was at work, he was desperate enough to drill a lock. I drove up on Wednesday morning, taking a personal day. The drive usually cleared my head, but today the trees seemed to lean in, oppressive and gray. When I turned onto the gravel driveway, my stomach clenched. The house was still standing. The temporary restraining order sign I had taped to the inside of the front window was still there, a stark white rectangle against the glass. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air was cold and stale. I walked through the rooms, checking the windows, checking the back door. Everything was secure, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the house held more secrets. I had found the inventory list in the kitchen cabinet. What else had they hidden here during their unauthorized visits? I started a grid search. I checked the drawers in the bedrooms. I checked the space under the bathroom sink, in the hallway closet, tucked behind a stack of old beach towels on the top shelf. I found a manila envelope. It wasn't dusty. It looked fresh. On the tab, in my father's distinct, blocky handwriting, was written, "Cabin, for after." My hands trembled as I pulled it down. For after. After what? After the sale? After I was out of the picture? I took the folder to the kitchen table and opened it. The first document was a contractor bid from a local construction firm, dated 3 weeks ago. It was a quote for a complete renovation of the basement. New flooring, drywall, a wet bar. The quote was addressed to Kent Harlow. He had been planning renovations before he even owned the deed. The second document was an insurance comparison, listing the premiums for a rental dwelling policy, short-term rental coverage, Airbnb. He wasn't going to keep it in the family. He was going to monetize it. He was going to turn my sanctuary into a weekend rental for tourists. But it was the third document that made the breath catch in my throat. It was a draft document, typed up but unsigned. The header read, "Family Usage and Reimbursement Agreement." I began to read. This agreement is made between Kent Harlow, owner, and Marlene and Dennis Wood, licensees. Whereas the owner has graciously agreed to acquire the property to relieve the licensees of financial burden. The licensees shall have access to the property for 2 weeks annually, subject to blackout dates during peak rental seasons. And then, buried in paragraph 4, Claire Wood, daughter of licensees, shall relinquish all claims to usage or access for a period of 5 years from the date of closing. Following this probationary period, access may be granted at the sole discretion of the owner, contingent upon a review of family conduct. Probationary period. Review of family conduct. I stared at the words until they blurred. This wasn't just about money. This was a punishment. This was a carefully constructed exile. They knew I would be angry when I found out they sold the house, so they had built a clause into their deal with Kent to keep me away. They had traded my inheritance for a bridge loan, and they had agreed to ban me from my own home for 5 years to keep me quiet. And the reimbursement? In exchange for said relinquishment, licensees agreed to pay Claire Wood a sum of $5,000 per annum to be drawn from the net rental proceeds, commencing in year 3, $5,000. Starting in year 3, they valued my home, my safe haven, my grandmother's legacy, at $15,000 over 5 years, paid out only if the rental made a profit. It was so insulting it circled back around to being funny. But I wasn't laughing. I felt a cold, hard knot form in the center of my chest. This document proved that they weren't just trying to help me. They were managing me. They viewed me as an obstacle to be mitigated, a child to be put in a timeout while the adults did business. I took photos of every page. I put the originals back in the folder and put the folder in my bag. This was evidence of premeditation. This destroyed their We were going to surprise her with the money defense. There was no money. There was only a lockout. I walked out onto the deck to get some air. The wind was whipping off the lake, biting and cold. Excuse me? I jumped, spinning around. Standing at the edge of the yard, near the property line, was a woman I didn't know well. It wasn't Mrs. Gable. It was the woman who lived 2 houses down. The one with the meticulously kept rose garden. She was wearing a fleece vest and holding a dog leash. "Ms. Wood?" she asked. "Yes," I said, stepping down from the deck. "I am Joyce Halloway," she said. "We met briefly at the block party 2 years ago." "Right," I said, trying to compose my face. "Hi, Joyce. I hope you don't mind me approaching you," she said. She had a clipped, precise way of speaking, but I saw the notice in the window, the court order. "Oh," I said, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "Yes, it is complicated. It doesn't look complicated to me," she said. "It looks like a title dispute." She let the dog sit. "I used to be a paralegal for a real estate firm in the city," she said. "For 30 years, I know what a lis pendens looks like, and I know what a rush job looks like." I waited. "I was out walking the dog a few weeks ago." She said, "October 10th. I believe, a Tuesday." I listened. "October 10th was 2 days before the alleged signing. I saw your father and another man, silver hair, driving a Mercedes, walking the perimeter of your house," she said. "They were measuring the windows. I heard them talking because the wind carries sound across the water." "What did they say?" I asked. The silver-haired man said, "We need to close by the 15th or the hard money lenders are going to eat you alive," she said. "And your father said, 'I will get her signature. Don't worry, she doesn't pay attention to the details.'" I felt the blood drain from my face. "He said that?" I whispered. "She doesn't pay attention to the details." Joyce nodded. "He did." And the other man said, "Just make sure it holds up. I am not underwriting a lawsuit." She looked at me with sharp, intelligent eyes. I didn't think much of it at the time. She said, "Families are messy, but when I saw that court order in the window today, I thought you might need to know that it wasn't a sudden decision. They were planning the timeline. I need that in writing." I said, "Please." Joyce nodded. I drafted a statement before I walked over. I have dates, times, and a description of the vehicle. I am happy to sign an affidavit for your attorney. I don't like bullies, Ms. Wood, and I don't like fraud in my neighborhood. She reached into her vest pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Here," she said. "Have your lawyer call me if she needs it notarized." I took the paper. It felt heavier than it looked. "Thank you," I said. "You have no idea what this means." "I think I do," she said. "Good luck, dear." She turned and walked away, her dog trotting beside her. I drove back to the city with the family agreement in my bag and Joyce Halloway's statement on the passenger seat. I went straight to Simone's office. When I showed her the draft agreement from the closet, she actually smiled. It was a terrifying expression. "This is beautiful," she said. "Beautiful?" I asked. "Legally speaking," she said, "it shows bad faith. It shows they knew you would object, so they planned to exclude you. It proves that the benefit to you was negligible compared to the benefit to them. It dismantles their best interest defense." She added it to the pile. "And I have news on the notary," she said. I sat down. "We subpoenaed the logbook from the pack and ship." She said, "We got a copy of the journal entry for October 12th. "And?" "The signature in the journal, the one you are supposed to sign when you get something notarized, is a scrawl. It is illegible, but the ID information recorded? It matches your driver's license. So someone had my license." I said, "Yes." Simone said, "But here's the catch. The notary is required to keep a photocopy of the ID for real estate transactions in this county." They provided the copy. She slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a photocopy of my license, but it was grainy, dark, and, crucially, the photo was smeared. You could see it was a woman with dark hair, but the features were indistinguishable. The notary claimed the toner was low. Simone said, "But I don't buy it. A blurry ID is a classic way to plausibly deny that you noticed the person standing in front of you wasn't the person on the card. And the security footage? I asked. Unavailable, she said. They claim the system overwrites every 7 days. Since we asked for footage from October 12th, and it is now November, they say it is gone. Convenient. I said, very. Simone agreed, but we have something better. She turned her laptop toward me. We traced the IP address of the email account Clarewood, Design, she said, the one that sent the approvals. I leaned in. It was created on a smartphone, she said, and when you create a Gmail account, it asks for a recovery phone number. Usually. People skip it if they are being careful. But whoever did this was either lazy or arrogant. They entered a recovery number. She pointed to a string of digits on the screen. Do you recognize this number? I looked at it. Area code 518-555-0199. I felt a heavy thud in my stomach. That is my mother's cell phone. I said. Simone nodded. Your mother's phone number was used to verify the account that impersonated you. It wasn't a hacker. It wasn't Kent acting alone. It was my mother, who had texted me, hang in there, while I was in my meeting, had sat down, created a fake email, and used her own phone to verify it so she could send a forged document to sell my house. It is undeniable now. Simone said, we have the nexus. Your parents conspired with Kent. They executed the fraud. What do we do? I asked. Do we arrest them? We could, Simone said, but criminal charges take time, and the district attorney might drag their feet on a family dispute. I have a better idea, a faster idea. What? We go after the money, she said. She picked up the phone. I am going to call the legal department of the title insurer, she said. Title insurance companies exist to protect against exactly this: fraud, forgery, defective title. Right now, they are on the hook. If this transfer goes through and is later proven fraudulent, they have to pay out the claim. They hate paying out claims. So, I am going to send them the IP trace, the affidavit from your neighbor, and the draft agreement you found. I am going to tell them that if they issue a policy on this transfer, they are underwriting a felony. And what will they do? They will freak out. Simone said, they will refuse to insure the title. And without title insurance, Kent's hard money lenders won't fund the deal. The money pipeline dries up. The closing dies. Not because of a judge, but because the risk is too high. Do it, I said. 2 days later, the strategy paid off. I was at work when my phone rang. It was my father. I stared at the screen. I hadn't spoken to him since the night I confronted them. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but I needed to know if the pressure was working. I answered. What? I said. Claire, he said. His voice was ragged. He sounded like he hadn't slept in a week. You have to stop this, he said. Stop what? I asked. Defending myself? The title company just called Kent. He said, they are pulling out. They said there are irregularities they can't clear. They are refusing to insure the deal. Good. I said, that is what happens when you commit fraud. You don't understand, he shouted, his voice cracking. If the title insurance falls through, the bridge loan defaults immediately. Kent has a clause. If the collateral isn't secured by Friday, the entire balance is due. That sounds like a problem between you and Kent. I said, he will take the house. Claire! My father was pleading now. He will foreclose on our house. He already filed the notice of default this morning. We are going to lose everything. The house, the cars, the savings. We will be bankrupt. I sat in my office chair, looking out at the city skyline. I remembered the inventory list. I remembered the 5 years clause. I remembered the way they had gaslit me, telling me I was unstable while they picked my pockets. If this goes public, he said, his voice dropping to a sob, if people find out, the shame. Claire, we will be pariahs. I realized then that he wasn't afraid of being homeless. He was afraid of being exposed. He was afraid of the country club knowing. He was afraid of the neighbors knowing. He was afraid of losing the mask of the successful, benevolent patriarch. He wanted me to save his reputation, He wanted me to sign the papers so he could pretend this was all a normal transaction, so he could pay off Kent and keep pretending he was a success. "Claire, please," he begged. "We are your parents. You can't let us lose everything." I took a deep breath. I felt surprisingly calm. The anger had burned down to a pile of cold, gray ash. "I didn't let you lose anything. Dad," I said, "you bet it, you gambled it, and you lost it." "Claire, and as for losing things," I said, my voice steady and quiet, "you are worried about losing your house? I already lost something. You just didn't count it." "What?" he asked. "What did you lose?" "I lost my parents," I said. I hung up the phone. I sat there for a moment, listening to the silence. Then I picked up my pen and went back to work. The closing was dead. The title was toxic. I had saved the lake house. But the war wasn't over. Kent Harlow was still out there, and now he was holding a defaulted note and a lot of anger. He wouldn't just go away, and neither would I. The collapse of a real estate deal is not usually a dramatic event. There are no sirens, no explosions. It is usually just a quiet cessation of email traffic, a file moved from the active stack to the dead stack. But in the case of the Lake Briarwood transfer, the silence that followed the title insurer's refusal to issue a policy was heavy with invisible shrapnel. Rory Blakely called me on a Thursday morning. His tone had shifted entirely. He was no longer the hurried professional trying to meet a deadline. He was a man realizing he had been used as a pawn in a game that could cost him his license. "Ms. Wood," he said, "I want you to know that I have formally withdrawn from representation of the seller in this matter. Thank you for letting me know." "Mr. Blakely," I said. "There is something else," he said. He hesitated. I could hear him weighing his ethical obligations against his personal outrage. "Go on," I said. "The investigation from the title insurer is ongoing," he said, "but I reviewed my intake notes. I think you should know that the request for an expedited closing, the 48-hour rush, did not come from your parents." "Who did it come from?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Mr. Harlow," Blakely said. "He called my office 3 times a day. He was adamant that the closing had to happen before the 15th. And, regarding the notary, yes, my paralegal usually schedules a mobile notary from a trusted agency," Blakely said. "But Mr. Harlow insisted that your parents use the pack and ship on 4th Avenue. He said it was for their convenience because it was close to your father's office. He provided the specific address and the name of the notary he wanted us to accept. He picked the notary." I said, "He insisted on it," Blakely corrected. "And since the buyer has the right to request specific closing conditions, we accommodated him. If I had known. Well, I just thought you should know. It wasn't a random choice." I hung up the phone. It was the final nail in the coffin of the accidental theory. Kent hadn't just taken advantage of a situation. He had built the stage, hired the actors, and directed the scene. He sent them to a notary he likely had in his pocket, or at least one he knew was sloppy enough to let a blurry ID slide. I needed to hear it from them. Not the lies, not the justifications. I needed the mechanics. I asked my parents to meet me, not at their house, where they could retreat into their comforts, and not at mine, where I didn't want their energy. We met at a public park, sitting on a wooden bench overlooking a duck pond. It was a gray, blustery day, the kind where the wind whips your hair across your face and makes your eyes water. They looked older. In the week since this started, my father seemed to have shrunk inside his coat. My mother refused to make eye contact, staring fixatedly at a group of mallards fighting over a piece of bread. Rory Blakely told me Kent picked the notary. I said, "I didn't yell." My voice was flat, carried away by the wind. My father nodded slowly. "Yes," and he drafted the rush order. I said, "Yes. Tell me how it happened." I said, "Not the why. I know the why. You were broke and scared. Tell me how." My father took a breath. It was a shallow, rattling sound. "He came to the office," he said, "after he called the loan. He laid it all out. He said he knew we couldn't pay him back in cash. He said he knew you wouldn't sell. He said, There is a way to solve this where everyone wins. He pitched the fraud to you. I said, he didn't call it fraud. My mother whispered. She pulled her scarf tighter. He called it a constructive workaround. He said if we acted as your agents, we could push the deal through, pay off the debt, and then he would lease the house back to us. He said by the time you found out, the money would be moved, the deed would be recorded, and you would just have to accept the payout. He drafted the power of attorney? I asked. My father nodded. He brought it with him on a flash drive. He said, just get this signed. I know a place that won't ask too many questions. And the signature? I asked. Who signed my name? My father looked at his hands. They were trembling. I did. He said softly. I practiced on a notepad for an hour. Kent watched. He told me when it looked close enough, I felt a wave of nausea. But I pushed it down. And the email? I asked. Kent set it up on his phone. My mother said, but he needed a verification number. He asked for mine. I didn't think. I just gave him the code that popped up on my screen. I didn't realize he was going to send your license. He had you scan it? He took a picture of it from your purse when you were over for dinner in August, she said. He said he needed it for compliance on the loan file since you were a potential heir. We didn't know he was going to use it for this. You didn't know, I repeated, but you didn't stop him. We were drowning. Claire, my father said. He said if we didn't do it his way, he would ruin us. He said he would sue us for the loan, expose the default to the club, to your mother's charity board. He held our lives hostage. So you gave him mine, I said. I looked at them. They weren't masterminds. They were cowards. They had let a predator into their lives, and when he turned on them, they threw their daughter in his path to slow him down. Did he offer to buy the house? I asked. Or did he demand it? He demanded it. My father said, it was a condition of the extension. He said, give me the lake house, or I take everything else. I stood up. The wind was biting through my jacket. You need to know something. I said, Simone is subpoenaing the phone records. She is going to prove that Kent orchestrated this, and when she does, his bona fide purchaser defense is going to evaporate. Good, my father said. Surprisingly venomous. I hope he rots. I looked at him. He will. I said, but you helped him dig the grave. Don't forget that. That night, the adrenaline finally ran out. For 10 days, I had been running on cortisol and rage. I had been a project manager handling a crisis. But after the meeting in the park, after hearing my father admit he practiced forging my signature while Uncle Kent watched like a drama coach, the structure of my resilience collapsed. I crashed. It wasn't a cinematic breakdown. I didn't throw things. I didn't scream. I just stopped sleeping. I lay in bed at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling, and my brain began to loop. I replayed every interaction I had had with my parents over the last year. Every time they asked about my job, every time they asked if I was dating anyone, every time they borrowed money for cash flow and paid it back 2 weeks later. Was it all a lie? Was I ever a daughter to them? Or was I just an asset they hadn't liquidated yet? I thought about the lake house, the way the light hit the floorboards in the morning, the smell of the cedar closet. I realized that the sanctity of that place was gone. Even if I kept the title, it would always be the place they tried to steal. It would always be the scene of the crime. I started to doubt my own memories. Did I sign something? No, I knew I didn't. But the gaslighting had been so precise, so confident, that a small, terrified part of my brain kept whispering, maybe you are the crazy one. Maybe you are unstable. I had to get up. I turned on the lights in my apartment. I went to my desk. I pulled out the calendar, the bank statements, the affidavit from Joyce Halloway. I touched the physical paper. Facts. I whispered to the empty room, these are facts. I spent the next 3 nights doing this, waking up in a panic, touching the evidence, calming down, sleeping for an hour, repeating. I was grieving. I was grieving the death of the family I thought I had. On Monday, Simone called me into her office. She looked energized, which usually meant she had found something devastating. Sit down, she said. I sat. I was wearing sunglasses to hide the circles under my eyes. "We got the phone records," she said. "From my parents?" "From everyone," she said. "We subpoenaed the carriers for your parents, for Kent Harlow, and for the pack and ship notary business." She laid a large chart on the desk. It looked like a spiderweb of lines connecting 4 dots. "Look at the timing," she said, tracing a line with her finger. "October 12th, 8:30 a.m., a call from Kent Harlow's cell phone to the pack and ship landline. Duration, 4 minutes. He called the notary the morning of the signing." I said, "Yes," Simone said. "And look at this. October 12th, 9 o'clock a.m., a call from Kent Harlow to your father. Duration, 10 minutes. October 12th, 2 o'clock p.m. The alleged time of notarization, October 12th, 2:30 p.m., a call from the pack and ship landline to Kent Harlow. Duration, 2 minutes. The notary called him." I said, "To tell him it was done." "Exactly." Simone said, "Notaries don't call the buyer. They notarize and hand the document back to the seller." The fact that Linda Miller called Kent directly immediately after the stamp hit the paper proves she was reporting to him. She was working for him. She sat back. "This destroys the independent third-party defense," she said. "Kent wasn't just a buyer. He was the puppet master. He was directing the notary. He was directing your parents. We have the nexus of conspiracy." "What about the calls to me?" I asked. She pointed to a blank space on the chart. "0, she said. "Between September 1st and October 15th. Kent Harlow called your parents 42 times. He called the notary 3 times. He called the title company 12 times. He called you 0 times. She let that hang in the air. For a man who claimed to be buying a property from a close family friend to help her out, he sure had a lot to say to everyone except the seller. She said, "This is it." I said, "This proves it. It proves fraud." Simone said, "But Kent is smart. He knows we have this. His lawyers probably already told him the phone records were pulled. So what will he do?" "He will try to settle," she said. "He will try to trap you." The offer arrived via courier the next afternoon. It was on heavy cream-colored stationery, drafted by a high-end law firm in the city, settlement proposal and release of claims. I read it in my kitchen. Standing up, "Mr. Harlow, in the interest of preserving family harmony and avoiding costly litigation, proposes the following. Mr. Harlow will withdraw the claim to the property title. Ms. Wood will agree to lease the property to Mr. Harlow's investment group for a period of 10 weekends per year, at a rate of $0. Ms. Wood will sign a non-disparagement agreement stating that the prior transfer attempt was the result of a miscommunication regarding authorization. Mr. Harlow will extend the loan maturity date for Marlene and Dennis Wood by 12 months. It sounded reasonable on the surface. I kept the house. My parents got an extension. Kent got some weekends. But I heard Simone's voice in my head. "Read the definitions." I looked at the definition of miscommunication. By signing this, I would be legally admitting that there was a communication breakdown. Not a crime. I would be absolving him of the fraud. I would be stating, on the record, that it was a mistake, not a theft. And the non-disparagement clause? That meant I couldn't report the notary. I couldn't report the title company. I couldn't tell the insurance commission that Kent was a predator. It was a hush-money deal, paid for with my own property rights. I called Simone. He sent the trap. I said, "Refuse it." She said immediately, "I am going to do better than that." I said, "I'm going to counter." I sat down and drafted my terms. I didn't use legal jargon. I used plain English. 1. Immediate and unconditional release of all claims to the property at 14 Briarwood Lane. 2. A written admission, signed by Kent Harlow, stating that he directed the notarization of unauthorized documents. This admission will be submitted to the title insurer. 3. Marlene and Dennis Wood must unwind their debts to Harlow Equity Solutions using their own assets. My property will not be used as collateral, leverage, or a bargaining chip. 4. No non-disparagement agreement. I reserve the right to cooperate with any regulatory investigation. I sent it to Simone. She polished it up and fired it off. The reaction was immediate. My mother called me 10 minutes after the email went out. "Claire, are you insane?" she demanded. Her voice was shrill, panicked. "Hello, Mom?" I said. "Kent just called your father. He is furious. He said your counteroffer is a declaration of war. It is a demand for accountability." I said, "He wants a written admission of fraud? He will never sign that. He could go to jail. Then he shouldn't have committed fraud." I said, "And saying we have to unwind the debt ourselves? Claire, we can't. We told you. We don't have the liquidity. If we can't use the lake house as a shield, he will take our home." "Then sell your home," I said. "Downsize. Rent an apartment. Do what normal people do when they are broke. Don't steal from your daughter. You are being so cold." She spat. The word hung there. Cold. I am being cold? I asked. You forged my name. You gaslit me. You tried to ban me from my own house for 5 years. And I am the cold one? We made a mistake, she cried. But we are family. You are supposed to protect us. No. Mom. I said, parents protect children, not the other way around. You broke the contract. You are willing to see us on the street? She asked. To prove a point? I am willing to let you face the consequences of your own actions. I said, that is not the same thing. I realized then that they still didn't get it. They didn't see the forgery as a crime. They saw it as a strategy that failed. They didn't see my boundaries as self-preservation. They saw them as betrayal. I hung up. The word cold stayed with me. It was the weapon they always used. If I wasn't setting myself on fire to keep them warm, I was cold. I needed to know I wasn't the only one. Simone had said Kent was a predator, that he had done this before. I needed to see the pattern. I went to the local library in the town near Lake Briarwood. I went to the microfiche, yes, they still had it, and the digital archives of the local newspaper. I searched for Harlow Equity Solutions. I found a few press releases. Local firm invests in community. Harlow Equity saves historic farm. I looked up the farm, the Miller farm. I searched for the Miller family. I found an obituary for a bustling patriarch, followed 6 months later by a notice of a property transfer. Miller Estate to Harlow Equity Solutions. Consideration: $350,000. The farm was worth $1 million. I found a phone number for a surviving daughter, a woman named Beatrice Miller. I hesitated, then dialed. Beatrice? I asked. My name is Claire Wood. I own a property at Lake Briarwood. There was a silence. I know who you are, she said. Her voice was tired. You are the one fighting him. Yes, I said. Did he buy your father's farm? He didn't buy it. She said, bitter and sharp. He stole it. He gave my dad a loan to cover estate taxes. It was supposed to be a bridge loan. Then he found a loophole in the environmental survey. He claimed the land was distressed. He forced a sale at 1/3 of the value. Did you fight him? I asked. We tried, she said. But my brother owed him money too. Kent turned us against each other. He told my brother if he signed the deed over, his debt would be forgiven. My brother signed. I didn't know until the locks were changed. I felt a chill run down my spine. It was the exact same playbook. Find the debt. Find the weak link in the family. Create a wedge. Force a signature. He likes to say he is helping, Beatrice said. He likes to play the savior. But he is a vulture. He waits for something to die, and then he picks the bones. Thank you. Beatrice, I said, give him hell. She said, for all of us. I walked out of the library. It wasn't just me. It was a community of victims, silenced by shame and family agreements. I called Simone. He has done this before. I said, the Miller farm. He used the brother against the sister. I am not surprised. Simone said, but now we have to make it official. What do you mean? Kent rejected your counteroffer. She said, he is doubling down. He is filing a motion to enforce the original purchase agreement, claiming he is an innocent party and that your parents had apparent authority. So we go to court? I asked. First, we go to depositions, she said. She explained what that meant. We would all be put in a conference room. A court reporter would be there. We would be sworn in, and we would have to answer questions under penalty of perjury. I have scheduled them for next Tuesday, she said. Who is first? You are, she said. Then your parents, then Linda Miller, the notary, and finally, Kent. I felt a knot of anxiety. But it was different this time. It wasn't fear of the unknown. It was the anxiety of a performer before a show. I knew my lines. I knew the truth. They are going to try to break you. Claire, Simone warned. Kent's lawyer is aggressive. He is going to try to make you look like a spoiled, ungrateful daughter who changed her mind. He is going to ask about your mental health. He is going to bring up every fight you ever had with your parents. Let him, I said. And your parents? She asked. They will be in the room. You will have to say these things to their faces. I thought about my father practicing my signature. I thought about the 5 years clause. I thought about Beatrice Miller losing her family farm because her brother was weak. I am ready. I said, the days leading up to the deposition felt like the calm before a storm. I organized my files. I printed the emails. I printed the phone logs. I put Joyce Halloway's affidavit in a plastic sleeve. I went to the lake one last time before the legal proceedings began. I sat on the dock, watching the water lap against the wood. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruises of purple and red. I realized that I wasn't just fighting for the house anymore. I was fighting for my own dignity. For 33 years, I had been the good daughter, the quiet one, the one who fixed things, the one who let family be the excuse for bad behavior. That daughter drowned in the lake 3 weeks ago. The woman sitting on the dock was someone else. She was colder, maybe, but she was solid. She was real, and she was done being sold. I drove back to the city on Monday night. I ironed my best suit. I polished my shoes. On Tuesday morning, I walked into Simone's conference room. My parents were already there, sitting on the far side of the long mahogany table. They looked small. My mother was clutching a tissue. My father wouldn't look at me. Kent was there, too. He was sitting at the head of the table, flanked by 2 lawyers in expensive suits. He looked up when I entered. He smiled. That same crinkly-eyed, benevolent smile. "Hello, Claire," he said, as if we were meeting for brunch. I didn't smile back. I pulled out my chair and sat down. I placed my heavy binder of evidence on the table with a loud thud. I looked him dead in the eye. "State your name for the record," the court reporter said. "Claire Elizabeth Wood." I said, and then the questions began. The conference room smelled of lemon polish and nervous sweat. It was a sterile, windowless box designed for conflict resolution, but the air felt heavy, charged with the static of unsaid things. I sat on one side of the mahogany table. Simone Vance to my right, her posture rigid and predatory. Across from us sat my parents, huddled together like children waiting for the principal, and Kent Harlow, who leaned back in his chair with the casual arrogance of a man who believed money could fix any breakage. This was the deposition. This was the moment where the misunderstanding had to be transcribed by a court reporter, where lies had to be spoken under the threat of perjury. Simone started with Kent. She didn't raise her voice. She was surgical. "Mr. Harlow," she began, staring at a document in front of her. "You stated in your affidavit that you believed you were purchasing the property from Claire Wood directly. Is that correct?" Kent nodded, then remembered the reporter. "Yes," he said, "that is correct. And yet," Simone said, sliding the phone records across the table, "in the 6 weeks leading up to the closing, you exchanged 42 calls with Marlene and Dennis Wood. You exchanged 12 calls with the title company. You exchanged 3 calls with the notary. How many calls did you exchange with the seller?" "Claire Wood?" Kent shifted. He adjusted his cufflinks. I didn't think it was appropriate to bypass her parents. He said, smoothness coating his voice like oil. They were acting as her agents. I wanted to respect the family hierarchy. "The family hierarchy," Simone repeated, testing the phrase. "Is that a legal term, Mr. Harlow?" "It is a cultural one," Kent said, flashing a tight smile at me. I was trying to help a family in distress. I didn't want to add to Claire's stress. By liquidating her primary asset without her knowledge? Simone asked. I assumed she had knowledge. Kent said. Her parents assured me she was on board. Simone let the silence stretch. It was a tactic. People hate silence. They rush to fill it with truth. So you relied entirely on the word of two people who owed you a significant amount of money? Simone asked. Two people who needed this sale to go through to avoid foreclosure on their own home? Kent's eyes hardened. I relied on signed documents, he said. I relied on a notarized power of attorney. I am a businessman. When I see a notarized signature, I assume it is valid. That is how the system works. He was good. He was pivoting back to the paperwork. I saw a signature. I believed it. It was the plausible deniability of a man who knows how to keep his fingerprints off the weapon. But then it was Rory Blakely's turn. The closing attorney had been deposed earlier that morning, his testimony recorded on video. Simone dimmed the lights and pressed play on the large monitor at the end of the room. Rory's face appeared, looking tired and pale. Question. Mr. Blakely, why did you call Claire Wood on October 30th? Answer. Because I noticed a discrepancy in the final signature block. Question. What kind of discrepancy? Answer. The seller's affidavit had been prepared by Mr. Harlow's office, not mine. It was a template. In the signature line, the name was typed as Claire A. Wood. I sat up straighter. My middle initial is E. Elizabeth. Answer. The person who signed the document signed it. Claire Wood. They didn't correct the initial. They didn't cross it out. They just signed over it. Simone paused the video. The room was silent. She turned to my father. Mr. Wood, she said, you stated earlier that you have known your daughter her entire life. My father looked at the table. Yes. Do you know her middle name? Elizabeth, he whispered. So, Simone said, her voice dropping to a dangerous hush. If Claire had been sitting in front of that document, do you think she would have signed her name under the wrong middle initial without correcting it? Without saying, hey, this isn't me? My father didn't answer. He couldn't. But a forger might. Simone said, a forger who was rushing. A forger who was so nervous about committing a felony that he didn't read the fine print. He just saw the line and signed the name he had been practicing. She turned back to Kent. Mr. Harlow, she said, you prepared that document. Did you type the wrong initial on purpose? To see if anyone would catch it? Or was it just sloppy work from a man who knew the seller wasn't actually going to see it? Kent's face turned a mottled shade of red. This is conjecture, he snapped. It is a typo. It is a smoking gun, Simone said. She moved on to the notary. Linda Miller had been subpoenaed. And unlike Kent, she didn't have a team of lawyers to prep her. She sat in the chair, a woman in her 50s with frizzy hair and a terrified expression. She looked like she wanted to be anywhere else on earth. Ms. Miller, Simone asked, do you recognize the woman sitting across from you? Linda looked at me. She squinted. I think so, she stammered. You think so? Simone asked. You notarized a power of attorney for her 3 weeks ago. You verified her identity. You swore an oath that she stood before you. Linda looked at Kent. Kent looked at the wall. I notarize a lot of people, Linda said, her voice shaking. Did Claire Wood stand in your shop on October 12th? Simone asked. Linda bit her lip. There was a guy. She said, a regular. He brings in bundles of papers sometimes. Real estate stuff. Who is the guy? Simone asked. Linda pointed a shaking finger at my father. Him. And was Claire with him? Linda hesitated. The silence in the room was suffocating. If she said yes, she was perjuring herself. If she said no, she was admitting to a crime. He said she was in the car, Linda whispered. He said she was sick. He said he had her ID. He said Mr. Harlow needed it done by 3 o'clock or the deal would die. So you notarized a signature you didn't witness? Simone asked. He had the ID, Linda cried out, defensive now. It looked like her. I was just trying to be helpful. Mr. Harlow called me that morning and said they were coming. He said it was a VIP client. He said to take care of them. Simone sat back. The air went out of the room. The knot had tightened until it snapped. The independent verification was gone. The helper defense had collapsed. Kent slammed his hand on the table. "This is ridiculous," he hissed at his lawyers. "She is confused. She is under oath." "Mr. Harlow," Simone said coldly, "and so are you." The ruling came down 4 days later. It wasn't a full trial verdict. We weren't there yet. But it was a decision on the injunction that signaled the end of the war. Judge Franklin issued an order extending the freezing of the assets indefinitely. The court finds significant evidence to suggest that the conveyance documents were not executed by the plaintiff. The reliance on a notary who has admitted to violating procedural law destroys the presumption of validity. The transfer is stayed. The title remains with Claire Wood, but the judge added a note that felt like a punch to the gut. While the transfer is halted, the court notes that the underlying financial entanglement between the defendants, Marlene and Dennis Wood, and the would-be purchaser, Kent Harlow, regarding the loan default is a separate matter not subject to this injunction. Translation: I had saved the house, but my parents were still on the hook for the money. They asked to see me. I met them at their house. The atmosphere was different now. The pretense of authority was gone. My father wasn't drinking scotch. He was drinking water. His hands shaking so much the ice rattled against the glass. My mother looked like she had aged 10 years in 10 days. We read the ruling. My father said. I nodded. I stood by the fireplace, keeping my coat on. I didn't want to get comfortable. Kent is moving forward with the foreclosure on this house, my father said. He gave us 30 days to vacate. I am sorry, I said, and I meant it. It was tragic to watch people burn down their own lives. Claire, my mother said, stepping forward. Her eyes were wide, desperate. You can stop this. How? I asked. Kent called us, she said. He is willing to drop the foreclosure. He is willing to walk away from the whole mess. In exchange for what? I asked, though I knew. He wants the lake house, she said. Not for free. He will pay the $200,000. He will wipe our debt. He just wants the asset. He says it is a matter of principle for him now. He can't stand losing to us, to me. I corrected. He can't stand losing to me. She grabbed my arm. Claire, please, it is just a vacation home. It is wood and glass. This is our life. This is where you grew up. If we lose this house, we have nothing. We have no retirement. We have nowhere to go. I looked at her hand on my sleeve. It was the same hand that had held mine when I was a child. The same hand that had texted me, hang in there. While she was stealing my identity, you want me to sell the house to the man who committed fraud against me? I asked. To save you from the debt you incurred by gambling with him? We are your parents, she wailed. Doesn't that mean anything? It means everything, I said. It means you were supposed to be the ones protecting me from men like Kent. Instead, you served me up to him on a platter. I pulled my arm away. I am not selling. I said. My father stood up. You are selfish. He spat. You are a cold, selfish girl. We raised you better than this. You raised me to value the truth. I said, or at least, you said you did. I guess I was the only one listening. Fix this, my mother screamed. Fix it. I can't, I said. You broke it. I walked out of the house. I walked out to the sound of my mother crying and my father cursing. It hurt. It hurt more than I thought it would. But it was the clean pain of a bone breaking so it could set straight, not the dull ache of a cancer left to grow. I didn't stop at just saying no. I listened to Simone. I needed to make sure they couldn't try this again. They were desperate, and desperate people are creative. We formed a legal entity, the Briarwood Trust. I transferred the deed of the lake house into the trust. I appointed a corporate trustee, a bank, to manage the title. This meant that even if someone forged my signature again, even if they kidnapped me and forced me to sign, it wouldn't matter. The property could not be sold without the approval of the bank's trust officer, a man named Mr. Henderson, who had zero emotional connection to my family and a very strict adherence to protocol. It cost me $3,000 in legal fees. It was worth every penny. It was a fortress. Kent didn't take the loss quietly. He couldn't sue me. He knew he would lose, and the discovery process would expose his other predatory deals. So he went to the court of public opinion. He started rumors at the country club. He told people that I was mentally unstable, that I had agreed to the sale, and then reneged when the market shifted. He told people I was suing my own elderly parents to squeeze money out of their estate. I heard the whispers. I ran into an old family friend at the grocery store who looked at me with pity and said, "I hope you are getting the help you need, dear." It stung, but I didn't engage. I didn't write a Facebook post defending myself. I didn't call the gossips to explain. I countered with silence and documentation. When a relative called to scold me, I simply emailed them the judge's ruling, the one that mentioned the forged signature and the violation of procedure. I didn't add a commentary. I just sent the PDF. Most of them didn't reply, but the phone calls stopped. The truth, presented without emotion, has a way of sucking the oxygen out of a lie. 3 months later, the dust had settled. My parents had lost their house. They hadn't ended up on the street. Kent wasn't that cruel. Or perhaps he just wanted them out of his hair. They had moved into a 2-bedroom condo in a neighboring town, paid for with the last scraps of their savings. They were bitter, they were diminished, and they weren't speaking to me. I drove up to Lake Briarwood on a crisp Saturday in February. The lake was frozen, a sheet of white stretching out to the tree line. The air was so cold it burned my lungs. I had invited them. I didn't know if they would come. I had sent a text. "I will be at the lake on Saturday. If you want to talk, the door is open, but only if you are ready to own what happened." At 2:00, a sedan pulled into the driveway. It wasn't the Mercedes they used to drive. It was a used Honda. I watched from the kitchen window as they walked up the steps. They looked hesitant. They looked like guests. I opened the door. "Hello," I said. "Hello." "Claire," my father said. He didn't hug me. He stood in the entryway, looking around the cabin as if checking for ghosts. They came into the living room. I had made coffee. We sat in the chairs facing the lake, the silence thick between us. "It looks the same," my mother said, her voice small. "It is the same." I said, "I removed the lockbox. I painted over the patch on the wall." They nodded. "We miss it," my father said. "We miss coming here." "I know," I said. I looked at them. I saw the parents I had loved. I saw the people who had taught me to ride a bike, who had paid for my college. But I also saw the people who had viewed me as collateral. "I wanted you to come here because I need to say something," I said. They looked at me, bracing for an attack. "I'm not going to apologize for protecting myself." I said, "I am not going to apologize for the house, or the trust, or the lawsuit. You made a choice to cross a line. You chose money over me." "We didn't see it that way," my father muttered. "I know." I said, "And that is the problem. You thought you had the right. You thought that because you gave me life, you owned my life." I took a sip of coffee. "The door you crossed wasn't financial," I said. "It was moral. You broke the basic covenant of trust, and you can't buy that back. You can't negotiate it back." "So what now?" my mother asked, tears welling in her eyes. "Are we estranged forever? Do we never see you again?" "That is up to you." I said. I put my cup down. "I am willing to have a relationship with you." I said, "But it will be different. It will be bounded. You don't have a key to my house anymore. You don't have access to my financial life. You don't get to demand things. You are guests in my life, not the owners of it." "And Kent?" my father asked. "Kent is gone." I said, "He is a predator who found victims. I am not a victim, and if you want to be in my life, you can't be his victims anymore either. You have to stop blaming me for his actions." My father looked out at the frozen lake. He looked tired. He looked defeated. But for the first time, he looked real. "He took the house," he said quietly. "The big house. It is gone. I know." I said, "I am sorry." He looked at me. "You beat him, didn't you?" "I didn't beat him, Dad," I said. "I just didn't let him win." He nodded slowly. There was a flicker of something in his eyes. Not pride, exactly, but respect. The kind of respect you give to someone you realize you can no longer control. My mother reached out and took my hand. Her grip was loose, tentative. "I missed you," she whispered. I didn't pull away this time. I let her hold my hand. But I didn't squeeze back. "Not yet. I missed you too," I said. "But I like who I am now. And I won't go back to being the daughter who didn't pay attention to the details." We sat there as the sun went down, casting long blue shadows across the ice. The house was quiet. The radiator clanked in the corner, a familiar, rhythmic sound. It wasn't a perfect ending. There was no grand reconciliation. There was no erasure of the scars. But the deed was in the trust. The locks were changed, and for the first time in months, the silence in the room wasn't filled with secrets. It was just silence, and that was enough. Thank you so much for listening to Claire's story. It's been a journey of betrayal, gaslighting, and ultimately, the reclaiming of one's own life. I'd love to know where you are tuning in from. Please drop your city or country in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want more tales of justice and resilience, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. And I want to hear from you. Do you think Claire was right to set such hard boundaries with her parents, or was she too cold as they claimed? Share your thoughts in English in the comments. Until next time.